And welcome once again to another episode of ELTea MENA, which is our Advancing Learning podcast series for educators in the MENA region. And we have a discussion with an educator who is based right here in the Middle East and North Africa for 30 to 45-minute discussion around a contemporary topic of their choosing. And we always do this over a nice cup of tea, which is always nice to do. And this evening, it's evening for Hala. It's almost the next day for me. It's so late over here in Dubai.
Yes.
I am joined by Hala Al-Matary. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Hala? That's correct.
Very
yeah?
correct. Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so let me introduce you quickly. So Hala is a certified EFL instructor. She's got a CELTA, and she is a certified teacher trainer with the Cambridge Train the Trainer qualification. And she's got a lot of experience. She's taught over 3,000 learners in the last 6 years-ish, and also trained over 850 teachers. So she's trained a lot of teachers, a lot of classroom experience. So she's running CELTA-based teacher training sessions and workshops for both novice and experienced teachers, helping them to gain skills and develop confidence as educators. One of the things that she's most keen on is observing lessons and identifying teacher strengths and weaknesses and helping them through feedback, advice, and individual coaching sessions. She's collaborated with lots of different teachers and teacher trainers through webinars over the last couple of years. And she is passionate about inspiring teachers all over the world. She wants to leave an impact, not just with the teachers that she works with and trains, but also the students that they teach. And anyone that spent a lot of time with me will know that this is something I'm passionate about, making sure that the work that we do with teachers as trainers passes into the classroom, really helps students to uplift their own skills, knowledge, and have that impact. Last but not least, she also happens to be a published novelist, and she's published 3 novels so far, a few years ago, 2014, 16, and 17. And she's currently writing her 4th novel, which is expected to be published next year. So Hala, a very warm welcome to you this evening. We're really happy to have you with us. It's always great to have teachers and trainers from here in the Middle East join us and talk about their experiences. So we're really happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Before we get going though, it's ELT time. So I ask everybody on every episode, do you have tea? Are you a tea drinker?
I got my Nescafe in here.
Perfect. Coffee drinker, hey?
Yes.
Excellent. I have tea this evening. Everybody knows that I drink a different tea each time. And actually, because look, it was my birthday like 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
Some very kind colleagues of mine produced this ELT time mug that I could use in these podcasts.
Really sweet of them. Amazing.
It was very sweet of them. I was very touched. But anyway, the tea that I've got is fruit because it's evening time. It's raspberry and peach, I think I've got this evening. So
nice.
Let's see how that goes down, shall we? Okay, so the topic of today's discussion is going to be about observations. It'll go in a few different directions, I think. But I think before we get started, I introduced you as a bio, but I think it's nice for us to get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you expand on that bio? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Help us to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Nathan. It's such a great educational gesture to be here with you and Macmillan and the lovely teachers that are attending this session with us. So I'm very happy to be here with you. And I believe that the introduction that you said was actually more than enough. You said everything. It was a great introduction. But I would say that I started my teaching career in 2017, but I always wanted to join the training department and help teachers become greater with their teaching skills and everything. Currently, I work as a freelance teacher trainer. I do not work with one organization. I work with many educational institutes, help their teachers, whether they were experienced, whether they were novice teachers. And this is the thing that I love the most. And yeah, that's it.
Nice. Okay, good. So I mean, being a freelancer is great, and I see a lot of freelancer networks and groups online. There's some really good ones on Facebook. In fact, maybe I'll make sure you're in them because there's a couple that are really good. And they give loads of advice to freelancers. So hopefully they will be useful. Okay, so in talking about you, I actually want to know a little bit about your writing. So because you're published authors. Is it in Arabic or in English? Is it in Arabic?
It's in Arabic. It's in Arabic, yes.
It's in Arabic. So what do you publish?
All of them. The one that I published already, all of them are in Arabic.
Okay.
Yes.
What are they about?
Well, different genres. So maybe like I talk about different topics that happen in the society, like around us, and topics like marriage, divorce. Sometimes I go with the romance side a little, and I love to discuss some of the controversial topics in the society. Okay. And currently I'm working on the fourth one, and hopefully one day, you never know, maybe I'd write something in English.
No, I mean, it's great that you're writing in Arabic. So it's fiction, is it? Fiction work?
Yes, but not all of them. Like sometimes I talk to actual people and I, convey their message and convey whatever experience that happened with them to other people so that maybe they learn from each other.
Okay, good. So it's interesting to talk about this, what you've published, because you've got these two aspects to your professional life, I guess. So, yes. And I always think that what we do outside of the immediate, either teaching or training, has an impact on what we do in our work life. So, because there's crossover in our life all the time. So, I never asked you before what it is you had published and what the new book was going to be about. So, I wanted to ask that question as a follow-up. Okay. So I also want to talk about your experiences in training, because when we talked before, you said you had a lot of experience, or you're developing a lot of experience supporting novice teachers or new teachers. So can you tell us why you decided to focus on this particular area, supporting new teachers?
Sure. All right. So when I started as a novice teacher one day, I had some difficulties because I did not get the proper training that I was expecting. It was just a little bit orientational training, if I can say so. And the organization that I worked for, they only picked people who spoke good English and maybe had some presentation skills, but they did not provide an actual training. So I used to go to the classroom, speak forever, and I just felt that there was something wrong. I shouldn't be speaking that much. I should be engaging the learners more, making the classroom more student-centered. So I wanted to help teachers who were me like 5-6 years ago. I didn't want them to suffer getting, no training at all, or maybe little training. So I want to provide the tools needed to those teachers so that whenever they run their classrooms, they run them with confidence and, run them smoothly. So that was the main purpose, the first main purpose.
Okay. Is there other purposes?
The other purpose is that some people are trained, by other trainers or maybe supervisors, and the supervisors and the trainers, they pass on inaccurate information, for example, or maybe they teach them what they learned, but what they learned was actually wrong. So they start passing on this knowledge to the teachers, and the teachers start applying these things in the classroom. That's why the first thing that I did once I had the ELTea back in 2019, I managed to change everything about my training, as you mentioned earlier, and to make it ELTea based. So that the teachers would learn from the approaches, techniques, methods, and frameworks, and start designing proper lesson plans that would eventually benefit their students.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, and I probably have seen some of that in my experience as well. I'm going to bring up something because I read a book, an academic book, Springer Nature book, because we're part of Springer Nature. It was by an author called Robert Lowe, I think he was called. Have you heard of this name? You probably have. No. It was quite recent that he published this, and he was exploring how training in classrooms often wasn't developmental. It was reinforcing the messages that course designers wanted to impart to teachers. So they frame it in terms of development, but actually what they were really doing is making sure that you're towing the line, I guess is the phrase we would use. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the longer you'd been in that institution, they started to use you as an example that makes you feel good because it looks like you have developed, but actually you are then the model for new teachers that come in, and they just keep that wheel kind of going around and around. I thought that was a really interesting perspective of looking at classroom professional development, and how we use this idea of development to reinforce the status quo, I guess.
What is it called again?
It was called Ideologies in English Language Teaching by Robert Lowe. It's only a couple of years old. It's 2020 or 2021, I think it was published.
Mm-hmm.
I have a copy. I have a copy. I can send it to you, actually.
That'll be great.
Yeah, and then we'll have another discussion about that next year. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, you just really reminded me of that particular book at that particular time. Okay, so we've talked a bit about your motivations, but talk us through a little bit about what you do because you said you based it on kind of CELTA type training sessions. So exactly. What do you do in your training? Maybe walk us through what a typical training looks like. How long is it? Who's there? How many people are involved?
Sure. So there are 4 essential aspects in this teacher training that we're talking about. Is that there is a part dedicated entirely to the input sessions, where I give the teachers the opportunity to take off the crowns of teachers and put on the hats of students so that they see what's going on. Of course, I have to demonstrate an entire lesson to them, for example, grammar, vocabulary, and they get to act as students to see what's going on. But also they have to have the eye of the teacher to notice the stages, to notice the aim of the procedures and everything. Yeah. Once I'm done with the demo, we go through the stages as teachers, talking about the aims, procedures, the rationale, the interaction pattern, the timing of each and every stage, so that by the end, I will give them a very little task so that they do the lesson themselves, or they have a lesson plan created on their own, because it's really essential to have a reflection once you're done, learning something or observing something. So that's the first part, the input sessions. The second part would be the reflection. As I mentioned earlier, they have to do the task on their own, because I remember reading this very interesting saying. It was, teach me and I forget.
Yeah.
You know that one? I think Benjamin Franklin say that. But the bottom line was like, involve me and I learn. So that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. I involve the teachers. I do not lecture them. I want them to notice what's going on inside the classroom, so that they start reflecting and brainstorming together and see what goes best for their students. Yeah. So reflection would be second. The third part would be, of course, for the demos. They have to demonstrate an actual lesson for maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so that later on they would get the feedback, and that would be the fourth aspect. They have to get oral and written feedback.
Okay, good. So there's lots of feedback. And I was going to ask a question then, and now it's gone from my mind. So they're creating lesson plans, they're developing their aims, they do reflections. So at this point, at the beginning, they're watching you interact with students. Yeah. And then it transitions from you away, and then them take that role. And then they reflect on that and do the demonstration.
So basically it's like from practice to theory. They see how it goes, and then they understand the why and the what. But that should be the last stage.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to remember my CELTA. My God, it was so long ago that I actually did it. Yeah. I remember we did that. We had a demonstration lesson, and everybody sat around, and then you did the reflections on your partner's teaching, and they did you, and then you got the examiners
Exactly.
overall reflections. Yes, similar kind of
Exactly.
stuff.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's talk about observations, because observations are obviously a really big part of this. So let's start with kind of your impressions about what good observations look like. Because I mean, I've taught a lot, and I've been observed clearly a lot, and I've seen a variety of what I would call good observations and not so good observations. So
Sure.
let's look at that spectrum. What makes for a better observation or a better observation scenario, and perhaps
Yes.
some of the pitfalls that we maybe sometimes see.
Yes, definitely. All right. So when it comes to observations, there are three observations that they have to be done. Of course, the pre-observation. So before the teacher starts demonstrating, I have to have a quick sit down with the teacher in order to make sure that the lesson and the planning is on the right track. Because, you know, sometimes the teachers, especially the novice teachers, they have great ideas, but they don't know how to implement them. And sometimes they end up implementing the wrong idea that is not really suitable for the stage itself. So it's very essential to have a pre-observation part where the teacher and I would start brainstorming together. Maybe I would adjust some of the things in the lesson plan so that once we start the lesson itself, the during observation part, the teacher would start presenting the lesson comfortably and accurately because we had a little sit down in the pre-observation part. So the pre-observation leads to the during observation. And as I said earlier, this is where the student start demonstrating the lesson, vocabulary, grammar, getting to know you activity, whatever that is. And I'll be there just taking notes, smiling every now and then because no one likes to be observed. Whether you have experience or not, it's really terrible. Nobody likes that. And of course, after the during observation, I'll have the post-observation part that I spoke about earlier, where I'd have the teachers and I'd start having a collective oral feedback, maybe highlighting the most essential common points that I noticed amongst the demos. And finally, once everyone is home and once the training is over, not the training, the session is over, I would send the written feedback, which is really, really essential as a development, like something that would develop the teachers with their lessons, written feedback.
Yeah, okay. So there's 3 stages. Just want to make sure I'm correct. 3 stages: pre-observation, so chatting with them, setting the scene, I guess, helping them to become comfortable with what's about to happen. And then you have the during, so they're doing their demonstrations, you're observing, you're making notes. Again, body language, making sure that they feel comfortable in that scenario. Definitely. And then post observations, first of all, you do oral, so it's a conversation with them once they finish, and then written later in the evening. Yeah, you send them some written notes following up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you have like a checklist? Is there something? How do you decide what it is you're going to focus on in the observation itself?
Good. So it depends on the lesson itself. Of course, there is a checklist for example, the getting to know you lessons, another checklist for the vocabulary, another checklist for the grammar. So it depends on the demo itself. And there are some fixed parts. For example, there is a part dedicated for the areas of progress and another part dedicated for the areas of growth, the things that they need to work on. And some little part, you know, because sometimes when the teachers are nervous or maybe when they are dealing with beginners for a very long time and they're not doing anything to develop their English, sometimes they might slip, like maybe a sound or two. So there is a part dedicated for the language inaccuracies. And eventually, as you said, there is a checklist, maybe the lead-in, was it okay? Check, setting the context, check, the pre-teaching vocabulary, check, and so on and so forth. And I make sure that the language that I'm using in the feedback is constructive. Yeah. And that is something that I learned during the Train the Trainer course that we spoke about earlier, that the language has to be constructive. And you shouldn't tell them everything like clearly. Sometimes you have to ask them questions and the feedback to make sure that they know what's going on. For example, Hala, I noticed that you ran out of time today. Why do you think this happened? So Hala would start thinking, okay, I spoke too much. The instructions were unclear. And then she would come back to me and tell me it's because one, two, and three.
Yeah. I mean, this is sounds very much like it's moving from a teaching model to a coaching model, right? Because, oh, sorry, from a training model to a coaching model, because a training model would be, this is the way it needs to be done. And I'm going to lead you through steps A, B, C, and D, and then you're going to go off and do it. A coaching model is what you've said. They do something, it's completely developmental. I'm not just going to tell you, I maybe have noticed something, but I'm going to frame it in a way which is, like you say, positive, constructive, and participatory, I guess, asking them
Exactly.
why they think, that happened, or, it's okay that that something went wrong. It was okay that you ran out of time, but why was that? What did you do previous to that had the consequences of whatever it is we're talking about, running out of time, for example? Why did you run out of time? We ran out of time because we spent too much time doing something else. Yeah. Okay. So how do we balance that time out in the future? So yeah, what happened?
Correct.
Why? How can we rectify that in the future? And it's going to happen. It's human nature. There's no perfect step-by-step lesson that can just be repeated every time. It's people interacting. So yeah, nice. Okay, good. So I want to move on to the next question. So I'm gonna include a question here that we mentioned at the beginning, which is based on, you've got a lot of hours of training experience of doing these observations. What would you say are the top things that tend to come out? It doesn't have to be necessarily for novice teachers. It can just be things that you've kind of noticed over time. This tends to come up a lot. I tend to talk to teachers about this particular area. It could be anything, classroom management or a particular skill or timing. Or but let's see if we can get, I don't know, 3.
Sure. All right. So when it comes to this area, it's usually the teacher talk time, whether we're talking about novice teachers or experienced teachers. And of course, the teacher talk time is part of the classroom management. They tend to speak a lot because they believe that if I speak a lot, actually doing the student a favor because he's listening to my brilliant, amazing accent, for example. And it doesn't go that way. Of course, they have to listen to you. And of course, you have to be there for them and talk, but it has to be controlled. So the thing that I noticed the most, whether we're talking about experienced teachers, novice teachers, would be the high teacher talk time. And sometimes they tend to go the extra mile, elaborating what's actually clear to the students. Yeah. And of course, they have problems giving instructions, checking the students' instructions. That's totally normal. So these are the areas that are very, very common, throughout the trainings that I have.
Yeah. That teacher talk time is an interesting one. I mean, I read something else the other day we're saying that we think we've got ourselves in this idea that teacher talk time is bad, and that's not necessarily true. Teacher talk time should be purposeful. That was the kind of point that they were making. So it's not bad to be talking, because some people have gone the other extreme. They're like, I will say the bare minimum in my classroom and put everything on the students, and that can cause problems as well, I think. But I think a lot of teachers do, like you said, there's this overuse of teacher talk time, and I think a lot of it is probably maybe filling time, and if they feel like if I'm not talking, then I'm not teaching. There's that kind of approach a little bit. Yeah,
and that's what the teacher did with them. When they had teachers, when they were high schoolers or maybe in university, they saw their teachers talking forever, and they thought that this is what teaching is about. So mainly that's the second reason behind this.
So breaking that down a little bit, which I guess takes time, right? It's not something that can be done quite quickly, because that's something, if it's something that you've experienced for such a long period of time, going through all those years of school yourself, breaking that mindset is not that easy, I don't think.
Exactly. I mean, I used to have the same problem when I started as a teacher, because I was taught that way. I was told that you have to speak, and you have to lecture them, and you have to let them know everything about the subject. So I used to do this when I was a novice teacher. And then I noticed and I discovered that it was not the best thing to do with the students. And that's why we have to attend trainings, workshops, get feedback, learn from that feedback. And I believe that this is the core of our conversation today, Nathan, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, this is what we're here for. Okay, so there's this area, teacher talk time. Anything else that kind of comes up kind of routinely? Any kind of other areas that teachers probably?
Yes, I would say that some teachers, they think that, following the checklist is what the lesson is about. Yes, it's essential to follow the stages accurately, with the students and make them engaged. However, it's really essential to show the genuine rapport and interest with the students. It's not a checklist. You're not a robot in the classroom. So sometimes they tend to forget this part and they just move from one stage to another accurately, I'd say. 10 out of 10, but there's no rapport. They're not showing the genuine interest needed, and they're not building any rapport with the students. They forget about this part. And I always tell them that if we have teacher A and teacher B, and teacher A is a very good teacher and knows how to build rapport properly, and we have teacher B who is an excellent teacher but no rapport, the students would choose teacher A, despite the fact that he was not as excellent as the other teacher. Why? Because by the end of the day, students also need a human being in the classroom.
Yeah.
They need to see that you clearly care for them. You're not just following the stages and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, this sense of belonging and well-being. We've touched on this in several of these podcasts, actually. This idea of building rapport, having a relationship with students in class, and the importance of that. Definitely has come up more and more, I think, in more recent years. And I think post-COVID as well, this has become quite an important topic, I think. This idea of well-being and students' well-being in the classroom and teachers' well-being on top of that as well. If you're building rapport with your students, you're also having a good time. There's nothing worse than teaching and feeling like you don't want to go into the classroom, you don't really like your students and you don't know them, and it happens a lot. It's happened to me in the past. You've kind of sat there and thought, I'm dreading going to this class. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. And then you go through this kind of scientific approach to teaching and class time. I'm just going to do this, and it says 5 minutes, and then I'm going to do this, it says 3 minutes, and you just kind of carry them through, and they're not really gaining as much as they could. And you're not gaining as much either, I think. So
exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and because Nada she's always joining us on the podcast, which is lovely, and she's saying the same thing. Nowadays, teachers are more and more aware of the fact that their role should be that of a facilitator or guide, rather than lecturing or talking for most of the time. Yeah, and it depends probably on the class that you have, which particular type of English you're teaching, or what segment you're teaching, if you're teaching primary or adults, and the expectations of students as well. That can be quite difficult. I know quite a lot of teachers in higher education segments, and I know you teach a lot of adults as well. You've taught a lot of adults. Is that because they've gone through a school system that's very lecture based, they kind of expect that. So it takes time with them as well, I think, to break down this idea of, I'm going to involve you guys, because they're like, oh, whoa. Like, I'm not used to this. Like, I'm not used to working with my peers. Just give me the answers.
Exactly.
Like, I've got a test coming up. I need to know what the answers are.
Yeah, spoon feeding.
Yeah. And it's hard to break that down, but we need to break that down, because otherwise they can't think for themselves. And if they can't figure it out for themselves, okay, they might pass the exam, but they're going to get a job and they're not going to be able to figure out things in their job for themselves. The knock-on effect, I think, is bigger than what's happening in the classroom. I think that's what people are realizing.
Yes.
Yeah. Somebody else is saying, bringing yourself down to their level, understanding them better. Yeah, you get acquainted. And this, I guess, is perhaps the overlap between what you're saying with training and actually teaching itself, is what you're modeling to these new teachers, to these trainees, is that You want them to observe what's going on in their classroom and find out their students' strengths and weaknesses and learn those feedback cycles that they can use with their students. Because like you say, if we're spoon feeding them as students, that's not passing through, right? Is that true?
Exactly. Definitely. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So before we finish, because there's one other thing I want to talk about. So I actually went to a blog of somebody that I know actually at the British Council when I worked there. And he found, because we were just talking about some of these things that you've noticed coming up more frequently, he actually had 5 things that he saw most regularly in his role as an observer, as a teacher trainer. One was classroom management. And we'll see if you agree with them. You can agree with them or disagree with them in our particular context. We'll use it as a devil's advocate. Let's do that.
Okay.
So he was saying one of the most common things was within classroom management is that teachers often engage only with the most, I'm trying to think of the right words to use, the higher level students. Like there's 2 or 3 in the class who are more outspoken. They tend to know the answers already. They didn't need to learn it from you. They perhaps knew it before they came to class. And that we often gravitate towards a small group of students within the class who are more able than the others to the neglect of the rest of the group because it's easier to interact with them. It makes us feel like we're making progress. So that was one. Mm-hmm. The second one was teachers not making lesson aims, not making students aware of lesson aims at the beginning of the lesson properly. That was the second one. The third one was avoiding pronunciation, often because teachers feel like it's a difficult area to teach. They don't feel confident teaching it. Sometimes they feel like, especially for second language teachers, speaking teachers, they feel like their own accent impedes their ability to teach pronunciation. That's the third one. The fourth one we already mentioned, which was timing. Teachers spending a lot of time on tasks that they probably shouldn't, like going through answers one by one and losing a lot of classroom time because of that. And the last one was not setting up activities with a demonstration. So we just tell them verbally the instructions, but we don't show them what it is that they're supposed to do. They were the 5 that he chose in his blog. Agree? Disagree? Any thoughts?
All right. So when it comes to the first part that you talked about, where the teachers prefer the active students and the quick learners, was that the first one?
Yeah.
It is true to some extent. They do. Yeah. And therefore, whenever I see this in classroom, I always remind them that they have to, talk to everyone, because students would actually feel that you prefer the good student and that you neglect them. So how about they make use of that good student sometimes? Perhaps you pair them up with someone, maybe so that they check their answers together. And whenever they're done checking the answers, ask maybe the less able learner or maybe that other student to report the answers back to you instead of the other active student. So the active student would feel, okay, Hala chose me to be with the student because she knows that I'm good. And the other student would feel better too, because he was the one who shared the answers, but now with confidence because he had some time to brainstorm a little bit with that other active student. So that's the first one.
But this is, oh, sorry, go on. I was going to say, this is about developing an inclusive classroom, right? This is, and there's lots of things that you can do. Like you just mentioned, these are really nice practical examples. Yeah, like you can, certainly with certain learners. And the nice thing about language is that it's fluid. You don't have to be in a chair to be able to use it. So you could have one student, like you said, the weaker student, one end of the room, the stronger student at the other end of the room. They've got to pass something back and forwards, or they've got to pass information from one student to another. So they all have to have a go. It's not about the teacher asking and the student responding. It can go around. It could be with a beanbag, all these types of things that show students that they all get to have a chance. Yeah, this is really nice. Yeah. Okay, sorry, go on. You were going to go on to the next one.
Yes, the second one was with the aims. Am I right?
Yep.
I've seen this a lot, to be honest. They are more focused with the stages and the core of the lesson itself, and they might forget the lesson aims. But then I would constantly remind them that it's essential to let the students know that by the end of the class or by the end of the lesson, you will be able to do 1, 2, and 3, because people forget. All right. So by the end of the class, students will say, the teacher made us play some games and we had the gallery walk together and we talked a little bit. Was that the aim of the lesson? But when you make the aim clearer for the students, they would say, so today I learned how to talk about my daily routine and my family's daily routine. So that's a better aim. So not mentioning the aim in the beginning of the class would make the students feel that there was no added value to the lesson. And that's catastrophic and sad, to be honest. So they have to remember the aims. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Really important to make those aims clear. Yeah. Excellent. Pronunciation? Do you see this a lot? Because I feel like this does come up a lot in MENA.
I'm sorry, come again?
Sorry, I was going to say pronunciation, because I feel like this particular topic does come up a lot in this region. I feel like there is a lot of teachers who feel like their accent is, I don't know the right way of putting it, but they feel like they struggle to teach pronunciation, basically.
You mean pronunciation as apart from the meaning, pronunciation and form, or pronunciation in general?
Pronunciation in general, I think.
Yes, they do not
like making sure that they show the mouth movements. It's about listening to sounds rather than. I think a lot of teachers teach pronunciation from the board rather than as sounds. So they teach as something you see rather than something you hear.
I agree. I've seen some very good teachers who manage to have this part presented properly to the students by showing them the mouth movements, as you said, and not focusing on the board. But usually what happens the most is that, yes, they start writing the word on the board, or maybe the Zoom board that we have here, the whiteboard, and they start asking some questions to make the students notice something, while they have to notice the pronunciation itself, the mouth movement, the word stress, the syllables and everything. So some teachers freak out because they don't like to present inaccurate information, because not all teachers know where the stress is. So maybe they would say the word photography correctly, but if you ask them where's the stress, they wouldn't be able to answer this question. So maybe they don't want to put themselves in the situation, perhaps. You never know.
Which is understandable, I think. No one wants to stand in front of a group of people and do something that someone in the audience pulls you up at being wrong and say, actually, no, the stress is not there. Or pretty sure there's 3 syllables and not 2. And then you're like, you feel crushed, you feel destroyed, and you're embarrassed and the lesson falls apart. Nobody wants to feel that. So it's easy to avoid that, I think. But yeah, I think definitely differentiating between pronunciation as an activity in itself and something like phonics. There's a slight overlap, but they're very different activities. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but yeah, pronunciation. And the last 2 was timing and setting up activities.
Yes, timing is like everywhere. Whether I had novice teachers or maybe really good experienced teachers, sometimes they do struggle with the timing. Sometimes the task is supposed to be for 5 minutes and they end up having the task for 15 minutes. Maybe they gave very long instructions, or maybe they repeated themselves twice. Maybe they didn't do a good job, perhaps with the interaction pattern when they start, putting them in pairs or groups. Maybe the TTT, the teacher talk time, was very high, or perhaps they chose the wrong task and the wrong stage. So yes, I see this a lot, but eventually by the end of the training, with the feedback that we talked about earlier and with the tips and tricks, they managed to work on the time management, and everything is, presented with the proper allotted time for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And time management feeds into classroom management, definitely. If you can get those timing right and balance out shorter activities with longer activities. And I guess it goes into the lesson aims as well, making sure that students know the end aim, the end goal, and all the little steps that it's going to take to get there, and how long each one is going to take, and making sure you stick to that kind of that roadmap, I guess, then students are like, okay, I know I'm doing this. I know I'm going to be doing this activity, and it's going to help me to achieve this particular goal. So I guess it's a lot about expectations and communication there as well, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, time is a teacher's greatest enemy. We never have enough time. And sometimes things run over, and I think that's also okay. There can be a bit of flexibility in the class, I think.
Of course. I mean, sometimes when there is something wrong with the internet, it's out of your hands. So things happen.
Yeah, I run over time all the time. Don't worry about it.
Yes, I can imagine.
Okay, good. So we've talked a lot about observations themselves. We've talked about the model of observations, the 3 stages. We've talked a lot about what goes on within the classroom, things that you've observed. And we've drawn on this blog article to think about areas of focus within typical training and observations. So let's try and bring it back to the kind of practical aspect, because I know we've got a few people who are with us listening, and they might want to act on some of this. So in terms of advice, I guess, to anyone who's listening, how can people include more observations? Because they might not have you come and do observations with people. What kinds of things can people do in their own professional development activities, in their own schools, to include observations more? I mean, I guess it could be self-observation, it could be peer observation, it could be supervisory observation. There's lots of different areas. So tell us a little bit. Have you got any advice for how people can include more observation, I guess?
Yes, I think you said it all. I mean, if you don't have like an actual supervisor there that would follow up with you constantly, and you don't have that aspect in your school, you can ask your colleagues to like attend their classes, and they can attend yours. And perhaps you make it as positive as possible by maybe writing down some notes, noticing what the teacher did in that stage and what he didn't in that stage. And perhaps if you want to give constructive feedback to your colleague, go ahead, and he would do the same thing with you, attending your classroom. Think of a technique that you would like to steal from that teacher and perhaps apply in your sessions with your students. If that's not there, of course, it's really essential that maybe you can watch recorded videos. I mean, YouTube has everything right now. Maybe you can watch these recorded videos and see how the teachers act with the students. How do they respond to their inquiries? How do they teach a certain area, vocabulary, grammar, whether kids or adults? And yes, someone here saying peer observation with feedback is great. Yes, I totally agree with you. And it's also very essential to know what you need and what you're actually great at. So for example, my points of strength are 1, 2, 3, 4, but I need to work on those areas. I know, for example, that I talk too much, for instance. I have a problem with the instructions, time management. So I need to come up with plans in order to make sure that everything is on the right track. So knowing and identifying what you do perfectly and what you still have to do is really essential in the observation part.
Yeah, and you said something really nice, actually. I agree with Sama. Peer observation with feedback is great, but I think peer observation doesn't always have to be about you, the observer, giving feedback to the person you're observing. It can just be about you. I want to come and watch your lessons. I want some ideas. I want to take something from it, and then I will go away and do something, and then I will feedback not on your lesson, but on how it went in my lesson, and then maybe you'll learn something from that. And again, that's teacher collaboration without it being like, I'm going to observe and I'm going to give you feedback on X, Y, and Z. I'm actually just going to watch. I just want to see. And I think you're definitely right. Having a focus. I want to watch for this particular purpose, not just I want to come and watch a lesson and get an idea for an activity. I want to see how this particular group of students is interacting with an activity, focusing not just on the teacher but on the students. How did they respond to the types of instructions that you gave? At what point within the activity did they start losing interest or getting bored, or, how could I have shortened that? Coming up with lots of different types of questions. And I think you're right, making it positive and just it being about interactional, just you and the other teacher. This is why peer observation is lovely, right? rather than
Exactly.
supervising, because you can just talk like, that was really cool. Like, but I saw this, and that the other teacher who was teaching would never have seen that because of the position they are in the classroom.
Exactly. So as long as you're using positive language, as you said, Nathan, everything will be all right. Because again, nobody likes to be observed. And if you said, or maybe you ended up saying the wrong thing using the negative language, people would start attacking you. Why are you saying this about my class? I think my class was great. So make sure that you use positive language whenever you give feedback to your colleagues.
Mm. That's peer feedback. One question I do have for you actually is, with COVID and the fact that everybody moved online and everybody became a little bit more comfortable with teaching to a screen like this, do you think people have become a little bit more comfortable with the idea of self-observation? Because I remember, let's say 10 years, 15 years ago, classroom practice, self-observation was very difficult. You have to set up a big old video camera in the corner of the room and get your VCR out and, you know, watch it yourself and try to rewind and all this kind of stuff. Now it's super simple because we're already teaching. I can just record the Zoom lesson and then go back. Do you think people have become more comfortable with the idea of self-observation?
Definitely. Way comfortable. I mean, when the session is recorded, you wouldn't feel frightened, because when you do that with the face-to-face classes with the camera and everything, I hate cameras and videos. But with the Zoom recordings, it's much easier now. And sometimes in my trainings, once I'm done with the feedback and I send it to the trainees, I make sure to send them the recordings as well, so that they see the feedback itself, the written feedback, and they see what they've done, and they start connecting dots together. So remembering the stages will be very easy now, because you can see everything comfortably and easily now. So definitely, yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we've got some advice there. Engage in as much self-observation as possible, I guess, that you have time for. We don't have a lot of time, as we've already established. But if you do have time, you know, and again, maybe just pick apart, maybe again, have a focus. So if we're thinking professional development over the course of the academic year, just observe, just reflect on the first 5 minutes of all of your online sessions and see whether or not at the beginning of the year to the end of the year, those 5 minutes have changed. Like, have I got into the lesson faster? Have I managed to get students to turn their cameras on? Or if it's face-to-face, you know, just reflect on a certain part. I think that's a nice kind of tip for people. And I guess the other one is that if we've become more comfortable with this idea of self-observation, then don't let that kind of slide. Now we've gone back to face-to-face, and try and get involved in more peer observation. If that comfort level is up, I think maximize on that. Find a friend, find a teaching colleague, and engage with them. Yeah,
I agree with you. And if it didn't work out with the peer observation, you can watch recorded videos, YouTube, online. I mean, it's everywhere now, so it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, and it's strange because we do this in all other aspects of our life outside of the classroom. If I want to improve my serve in tennis, I will watch tons of YouTube videos of professionals in slow motion, and this is how we learn, right? We emulate and we practice, and then we find kind of what fits for us in our own lives. Yeah, really nice. Okay, good. So we've kind of run over time a little bit. So let's finish off the topic for today with teaching tips. We always finish up with our guests' favorite teaching tip. It doesn't have to be necessarily about observations. It can be anything you want. Do you have a number one tip that you like to give to teachers?
Yeah, I would say just keep learning. I mean, if you're new into this field, or maybe you have very good experience, just keep learning something new from time to time. You know, you have to sometimes, because sometimes even if you're passionate, you might lose your passion sometimes, because teaching is very overwhelming, you know, dealing with the students and everything. So try to do something new that is related to the field every now and then. Learn something new and show your students your genuine passion about teaching them, because showing passion is contagious. If you're passionate about something, they would start, you know, becoming passionate about learning the language, or perhaps becoming better employers, or whatever that is. So I would say learning, yes, and showing your passion to everyone, and showing genuine interest to your students. Yeah. And yeah, one more tip, if I can add that.
Of course, yeah, go for it.
since that it's a very overwhelming career, we have to be honest here, make sure to have some you time every now and then, because if you didn't, you will be consumed, whether we like it or not. It's a very overwhelming career. We enjoy it and everything, and we love our students, but try to have your you time in order to recharge. So if you can travel, read a book, do some crazy activities with your friends, maybe take some time off, that would be a good idea.
Yes, yeah, and even for the non-teachers, the trainers among us, we also need to keep this in mind because, yeah, I mean, it's never ending, right? There's no end to teaching and learning. It's continuous. So if you don't switch off, you will just feel like I've got to keep going. I've got to make the next step and make the next step, and you'll never get a rest. So yeah, definitely learn how to switch off. It's beneficial for your students as well. And the other one I think is really nice as well, all about passion, rapport, relationships. I love all of that kind of stuff. And just that growth mindset to finish off. And of course, Macmillan Education are here to support all of that. If you want to try something new, we've got a ton of stuff going on to help support teachers in this area. So get involved with us. Hala, obviously, you are a freelance teacher trainer, so get in touch with Hala as well. And I'm sure she will be more than happy to talk about all sorts of different things that she could do with you. You do both face-to-face and online? You do stuff online in other countries as well, or just in Egypt?
Some teachers are from other countries, to be honest, especially when it's an online training. So I got some people from different countries.
Okay. Yeah.
And even people here, some teachers are here and they're not from Egypt, whether, speaking about the face-to-face trainings. I got people from Canada, America, Saudi Arabia, different countries. So that was really nice.
Good. So basically anyone can get in touch with you and talk to you about that.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. And I'll make sure I put your contact details when I post it later as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hala, for this evening. My cup of tea has come to an end. Raspberry and peach is at the bottom of the cup.
Yeah, mine too.
You too? Yeah, yes. We've had such a great long conversation about all different aspects of professional development. It was kind of wrapped up in observation, but I think we covered a lot of different topics and a lot of food for thought, I think, for areas of development for teachers and for working together. I think a big part of our conversation was about working together. So I really enjoyed our conversation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Same here. It was my pleasure being. It was my absolute pleasure being here with you, Nathan. And I also would like to thank the amazing teachers that joined. Neda, Rubina, I hope that I said your name right. Samah, and there was one last name. Actually, yeah, these are Natia. Natia, did I say your name right?
Natia. Coming in at the end. She's probably been listening there in the background. She usually is.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for being here. And I had a wonderful time.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you again. Same for me. Thank you to everyone who's been joining us in the chat box. Some really nice comments there as well. So if you enjoyed our discussion today, of course, this is episode 4. So there's 3 episodes from this season. And of course, there was 16 episodes from season 1. So there's plenty on the Academy website for you to go back and have a listen to if you're new to us today. And we've got 2 podcasts coming up in October, one in the mid and one towards the end. So I will post them on the Academy groups and the MENA groups in the next week or 2. For now, though, from Hala and myself, we wish you and your students all the very best, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Hala, have a very good night, and thank you very much again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.